talking about what's going on since 2000, into 2007 to 2008, big recession. A big recession means spending has fallen, or in economics terms, aggregate demand has fallen. And the traditional cure for it, if you will, since about the 1930s, has been for the government to exercise some fiscal policy, either to spend more money or to reduce taxes for you and I, so we'll go spend more money. That's called stimulus. This is stimulus spending. And the argument is that if the government, for example, decides to pay me more money to teach, and so I get another $100 in my paycheck, what am I going to do with that extra $100? I'm going to spend most of it. I may save a couple of dollars, $5, $10, but for maybe $90 of it, I'm going to run out and I'm going to spend it somewhere. And if I spend it in your store, what are you going to do with it?
You're going to grow and hire people.
You're going to grow, you're going to go out and buy more stuff, new car, whatever, and as you're growing, you're going to be hiring more workers. That is, if all of us continue to re-spend the money every time you get it. So if I spend it at your store, you spend it at her store, she spends it at her store, that money is getting spent again and again and again. That's called the multiplier effect. And the idea behind stimulus is if you can get that money into the economy and start it being re-spent, you'll create more jobs. Because every business will see more customers coming in. Now, our controversy today is who creates jobs in this country? Is it the wealthy people? Is it the business owners that create jobs? Some say yes, that's exactly who creates jobs. Others say, no, you misunderstand. They create jobs when they have customers. It's the customers who create jobs. And so the other argument is, no, it's the middle class of America that are the big job creators in this country. You can give all the breaks you want to business, but if they don't have any customers, they're not going to create jobs. So watch and see how that plays out over the near term here. This is stimulus. There is a problem, however, when you go out and spend more money, government, or when you reduce taxes, tax rates. It means you have less money coming in. So if you have less money coming in, but more money going out, what do we call that? When you're spending more money than you got, than you make it. Spend more than you make. Called a deficit. And when you do this, our government tends to run deficits, and in fact, huge deficits today. So other folks are saying, this is an interesting theory, but we can't afford to keep borrowing money the way we have been for the past many years. What we need to do instead is we need to cut government spending, maybe raise taxes, but you don't hear much talk about that. Make huge cuts in government spending so we can balance our budget. So we don't keep going into debt. Someday people are going to stop loaning us money and we're going to be in real trouble. Now this approach where you try to pay off your debt is called the austerity approach. Austerity means being very frugal, very austere, only spending money that you have, not money that you borrow. And so the big debate has been, throughout this past presidential election, what should we do? Should we practice austerity and balance the budget? Or should we practice stimulus and create jobs? And the Republican argument was basically austerity, and the Democratic argument was less austerity and probably more over here. Not really clear what they intend to do, but it looks like that may be the direction they try to go. What's the problem with austerity?
You have to cut back.
You lose jobs. What's the problem with stimulus?
You're giving money that you don't have.
Your debt is growing. So ask yourself, which of these would you rather have?
Which one would get us back on track faster?
Good question.
Is there a way where we can spend money and then can we do a little stimulus and then a little austerity?
Well, everything you do here hurts here, so trying to do it at the same time, I think, is difficult.
Well, I was saying do like stimulus first and then cut back.
You're right on track. And this is now more my opinion, okay? But it's not just mine. What if you first get people to working, because what happens to the amount of taxes the government collects when people are working? They collect more money. So if you have to go further into debt in the short term to put people back work and start bringing in more revenues, can you, once you have people back working, can you then start cutting government programs here and there? You'll have fewer people, by the way, on welfare if you have a healthy economy, more people working, fewer people draw on unemployment, those kinds of issues. So what I've been advocating on Facebook and everywhere else is do this first. And if, for example, unemployment gets down to 6.5%, 6%, it's 7.8 now, okay? If unemployment comes down that far, then let's start looking at how to reduce the size and scope of government.
Isn't number one been already done?
It was attempted in 2009 with the Obama stimulus, some $784 billion. Even as they were constructing that, a number of people who have been consistently right in the way they've called this process were saying that is not nearly enough money to get us out of the mess we're in. That, in fact, that $784, whatever it was, $billion, it kept things from getting much worse, from unemployment going up to 10 or 11%. But it wasn't nearly enough stimulus to get us out of the mess we were in. So has it been attempted? It has been attempted. It was not very well done, and it was not of sufficient size to have done the job had it been perfectly done. And so some people say, well, we tried it and it didn't work. My answer is no, we didn't try it. You know? We didn't try it the way it's got to be done. And when you try it only halfway, don't expect it to succeed and don't call it a failure. Because the failure wasn't in the stimulus, the failure was in the size and the mechanics of how that money got into the economy. Now, that's my opinion. Other people will disagree, and they'll tell you we need to do this first. If you look at doing this first, take a look at Greece, take a look at Spain, take a look at Italy and Portugal in Europe. You're seeing 25 to 50% unemployment. You're seeing people rioting on the streets. You're seeing those economies basically shutting down because that's what happens.
You mentioned in one of your videos, I think, how Reagan dealt with the debt that was there before he got there. Did he those 5 things that you said that he that were part of his plan?
Let me suggest that the debt was not that great when Reagan came in. And that when Reagan came in, and this was kind of transitioning us into this next part, under Reagan, he cut taxes, particularly to you and I, households, and then, of course, to businesses. When I say cut taxes, you cut tax rates. Why would we want to see lower tax rates? We just said that. More money in the hands of businesses and consumers. And for businesses, when you see consumers getting more money, you know they're going to spend it, and so you get much more optimistic about the future. And you've got more money, and so you start to invest it. He also, in that process, used more accelerated depreciation and other accounting techniques that benefited businesses and caused them to spend more money.
And with that, they brought on more supply, which reduced inflation?
Well, it was intended to, and it did to a degree. Let's just, you remember the other parts of this?
Yes. Deregulation of businesses.
Deregulation of businesses, but, as much as possible, because that was expensive to businesses.
Reduction in Social Security program or social programs.
Social programs, not Social Security. Reduce social spending, social programs.
And defense spending increase.
And because by 1981, when he was came into office, our military had not recovered from Vietnam and was in pretty bad shape, facing what we thought was a pretty formidable enemy in the Soviet Union. So these are the 5 main elements of what Reagan wanted to do at the time. And he was successful in 4 of them. He got his tax cuts, he got his deregulation, he got more defense. And I'm biased about this too, but I think his defense spending in 1981 forward is what led to the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1989. So I give him a lot of credit for the defeat of communism. Bias there, but that happens to encompass the years I've been in the military. What he did not get was this. He was not able to cut the social spending the way he wanted to because the Democrats still control Congress. They wouldn't let those cuts take place. Now, that's kind of what happened. Let's look at the theory behind all these tax cuts. And this is what we call the Laffer Curve. This is named for Arthur Laffer, an economist. It's not his theory. It's been around for a long time. But the story is he explained it one day on a cocktail napkin over lunch to a couple of guys like Dick Cheney, you know, power hitters. And they said, well, damn, that makes sense. Let's try that. And so here's how it's working. This is tax rates. And this is tax revenues that the government collects. And if you start raising people's tax rates, you should collect more money. That makes sense? If I've got to pay 15% instead of 7%, I'm paying more taxes. And so you get a line kind of like that. Higher rates, higher revenues. But at some point, when you get the rates keep going up, you don't keep getting more and more tax revenues. At some point, your tax revenue collections begin to slow down. Why? Tax rates are so damn high, we cheat like crazy. We claim our dogs and our cats as dependents and exemptions. We pay attorneys and accountants big money to find us more loopholes. We work in the underground economy and try not to declare our income. And the argument goes that if you keep raising rates even higher, you will in fact decrease your revenues. You'll start collecting less money. Now remember that prior to 1964, the very wealthiest Americans, and I'm going to guess people making over $1 million at that time, any money over $1 million you made, you paid 90% of it in taxes. 90%. There were some 16, 18 tax rates based on your income. And they were pretty high. So Reagan comes in. Well, this had been dropped in 64. It was dropped to 70%. And when Reagan comes in, it drops to 50%. And then eventually down to 28%. And all the taxes on all the other levels of income are reduced as well. So we get this incredible tax break. And the theory was, when Reagan came in, we were here, and he was going to take us to here. From this high rate to a much lower rate. I don't know about you. I had just started teaching at Santa Fe in 1980. When I heard that, with the understanding I had of economics, I thought that sounded like an excellent plan. Certainly worth trying, because we weren't doing very well otherwise. And so we cut tax rates. And we cut them again. But unfortunately, instead of collecting more money, we were apparently maybe here and we went to here. Now we cut rates and we also collected less money. But this idea that with lower tax rates you'll create more jobs, more people will work, and more people will pay taxes, so you collect more money. We've had that pitched at us now 3 times. With Reagan, with Bush, the second Bush, and then from Romney. This Laffer Curve supply-side argument about lower tax rates stimulating the economy so much we'll collect more revenue has not worked. It just hasn't occurred. The result was that under Reagan, we saw tax revenues declining, we saw military spending going up, we saw social spending not changing, and the result was the beginning of large deficits, which have gotten even more out of control under Obama as the economy has shrunk further. And you have fewer and fewer people paying taxes.
So
Okay?
it's never worked?
No. There's a fairly famous guy named Joseph Schumpeter who theorized that it was at 27% you collected your maximum revenues. I don't know, maybe he was right.
How would they? So it's all speculation that it's is that point of the curve?
Yeah. I mean, this curve might look like this. It might look like this. We don't know. And so we're trying to guess what people's behavior would be when you raise or lower tax rates in this range. And we don't know until we try.
Based on a theory, you just on a theory. That's
yeah. But think, it's not pure theory. It's not make-believe. It's not fantasy. It's common sense in your reasoning. It's just you don't know which rates are appropriate. So that's the mess we're in now.
And you don't know where you are on the curve, so it's...
No. And you look at the curve and say, oh, that's very interesting, except other things change in the economy all the time, too. Okay? So it's really kind of hard to say.
Just send out a survey and ask us what we want to pay in taxes.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Here's your paycheck. Send us what you think you owe us. Good luck. So, I would ask you to be familiar with these arguments, these concepts. That was the heart and soul of it. You will find on the Republican side what we call neoclassical economists who disagree. I haven't seen a convincing argument anywhere about, yeah, we collected more money. But they still continue to emphasize that things are different, that those continued tax cuts will benefit the economy and grow the economy. These are the same people who tell us that the rich are the job creators. And I happen philosophically to disagree. I think the job creators are you and me.
But if you raise taxes now in an economy like this...
If you raise taxes now on middle-class America, you're going to shoot us in the foot. You're exactly right. So what is Obama trying to do? As a matter of fact, let's bring that up. Effective January 1st, we hit the fiscal cliff. Have you heard that term lately? Effective January 1st, we're going to see huge cuts in spending and significant increases in taxes, which is going to probably put us right back into the recession. Again, unemployment's going to start climbing up 9.5%. If we can't get the yahoos in Congress and the President to agree on how to start moving towards balance in that budget. But balance in that budget's got to be balanced against growing our economy and putting people to work. So how are they going to do that? And that's what all the talk is about today. Obama is saying, let's raise taxes on the people who make, on anybody whose income, that part of their income over $250,000, let's charge them a higher tax rate. So if you make less than this, you still keep your tax cuts that you've got right now, relatively low taxes we got from Bush. If you make $1 million, it means anything over $250,000, so the last $750,000 will be taxed at a higher rate. The Republicans are opposed to any kind of tax increases because they feel higher taxes put a drag on the economy. And there's their debate.
So are people that are making all that money, they're paying less in taxes than middle class now?
You have to be careful how you say that. They're paying a lower tax percentage of their total income, perhaps. Okay? But they're paying a hell of a lot more tax dollars than you and I. So we're into a debate about what's fair. Good luck. Debate that anytime you want, but never do it when you're drinking. You'll have a fight on your hands. Ask me how I know.
Is it not moral to give everybody the same tax rate?
Well, I don't know.
Why would I want to make more than $250,000 now?
Well, because if the tax rate today is, say, I think it's, let's call it easy figure. If the tax rate today is 40%, and they raise it to 60%, then you'll pay an extra 20% taxes on that $750,000. An extra 20%, that'll be $150,000 in extra taxes, which you'll still keep the other $600,000.
It just makes it. I mean, I'm not saying. I'm just saying. It's very discouraging for those who work very hard to make that money, who have businesses to make that money. Seems to think that they're going to have to pay a lot of money in taxes based on all of their income if they make over $250,000. And then when you think about that, why would they even want to do that?
Well, let's do this. If they're paying 40% tax on that $750,000, how much is that? $300,000?
In tax, they're paying $300,000.
Yeah. And if we go to this, what's 60% of 750,000? Come on, it's finance class. Don't pray that answer in, calculate it. It's 450,000. So under this proposal, they would pay an extra $150,000 in taxes out of that 750. And then you have to ask, how big a bite, how big a burden, how big a discouraging factor is that to wanting to grow your business larger and larger?
Exactly.
And if you're paying a 60% rate on that extra income, that means you can grow your business as big as you want, but you only get to keep 40 cents out of every dollar you make. That can be discouraging.
Could be discouraging. I mean, especially if you want your business to grow. And
Sure.
I'm not saying they create jobs, but they do provide jobs.
You
to
provide
the
jobs.
boss.
The counter argument that some make is that in the 1950s, with that 90% tax rate, we still had a booming economy growing 3 to 4% a year. That under Bill Clinton, they weren't this high, but they were higher than they are today. In the 90s was one of the biggest boom period in American history. And so those higher tax rates aren't nearly the disincentive that some people would believe. That's the Democratic argument.
But are we on uncharted waters right now?
Well, we always are to a degree. I think the big uncharted water we're on right now is I don't see how American consumers at today's wages, which have been flat for 30 years, even with tax cuts, are going to be able to buy a hell of a lot more. I think, and this is what's in conversation today is let's take a look at the fundamental tax structure of this country. Let's start eliminating some of these loopholes. And that's where all of us will take a hit.
As far as spending goes, we're never going to go back to the same way we once did. I mean, the big box stores aren't doing well like Best Buy. People are shopping online,
Absolutely right.
So, I mean, and with jobs as well, they found, at least what I'm understanding, is they're finding that you could hire one person to do what 3 people were doing before. Why would they need?
Well, you got a couple of things going on. One is we've got enough technology to make one person as productive as 3 used to be. We're also finding that businesses much prefer to hire part-timers, not full-timers, and so wages are kept very low with no benefits. Well, if you keep wages really low with no benefits, how much money are those people going to go out and spend to stimulate our economy? They can't afford to. Not a hell of a lot. So how far down the road do we go in this direction? And to some degree, this is not uncharted waters. If you look at the American economy, say from 1880 to 1930, it was very similar to today. You have a relatively few very rich people and a huge amount of very poor people. We didn't make much progress until after the Great Depression. After the Great Depression, we taxed the hell out of these folks, so there were less. And we had all kinds of programs for these folks, so we raised their standard of living, and we had a much larger middle class. And that's what drove our economy. But it's not the same situation today. We don't have great big companies like General Motors giving you a job with nothing more than a high school education where you can make $65,000, $70,000 a year. Because it takes more education than that. So we've got to make some fundamental changes in the structure of our economy, too. And if we don't, you're looking at a real slow-growing economy, real slow growth in wages. Standards of living aren't going to change very much. It's a grim time to be graduating college if that pattern continues. Can I have an amen on that? Okay, never mind. What else on your mind? When do we meet again? Or do we?
It says
Yeah, we have one more class before the exam, I think.
The 28th.
the 28th.
And by then, of course, you will have the practice exam in your hands. And once again, material from the textbook, material from general discussion of finance, and the videos on economics. And this class tonight, we'll edit and put this discussion we've had online as well. All right, anything else? Thank you.